Welcome, and thank you for joining Deep Sleep Stories. Settle in now and let your body find its most comfortable shape, because tonight you'll be carried to a hidden place by the sea, where a quiet library lives among tide pools and moonlit shells. You may notice the room around you soften at the edges, as if the air itself has decided to become kind. Let your jaw loosen. Let your shoulders sink, heavy and warm, as though they're made of sand that has finally stopped trying to hold its shape. If it feels good, let your hands rest where they naturally want to be, palms open, fingers uncurling in their own time. Take a slow breath in, as if you're sipping the cool, clean scent of ocean mist, and then breathe out long and easy, letting the day slide away like water slipping off smooth stones. Another gentle breath in, another soft breath out. There is nowhere else you need to go right now. Nothing to solve, nothing to plan. Only this moment and the steady rhythm of your own breathing, like waves arriving and departing without hurry. Imagine, just for a while, the sound of the shoreline at night, the hush and hush again, the faint, distant call of seabirds tucked into their nests, the slow, patient pulse of the tide. With each exhale, let the mind grow quieter, as though it's turning down a lamp until the light becomes a soothing glow. And as you sink deeper into comfort, you can let the story begin gently, like the first ripple that spreads across a still pool. Far along a coast where cliffs leaned over dark water like sleeping giants, there was a small cove that most people never noticed. It wasn't marked on maps, and it didn't try to be famous. The path to it was easy to miss, veiled by salt-silvered grasses and the kind of wildflowers that bowed politely to the wind. When the tide pulled back, the cove revealed its secret, a field of tide pools scattered across the rocks, each one holding a small universe. Some tide pools were deep and glassy, dark as ink and glossy as polished obsidian. Others were shallow and bright, catching starlight and moonlight, turning it into trembling ribbons. In those pools, tiny crabs tiptoed sideways as if they were trying not to interrupt the night. Sea anemones opened like patient underwater blossoms. Strands of seaweed floated and drifted, slow dancers in a quiet ballroom. On the nights when the moon was gentle and the waves arrived with soft hands, a lantern would appear at the edge of the rocks. The lantern did not hang from a post because there was no post. It did not rest on the ground because it would have been swallowed by sand. It simply hovered, as though it had forgotten the difference between up and down. Its light was not harsh. It was a calm glow, like warm honey held in a small jar. The lantern would sway, and the air around it would shimmer with salt and patience, and anyone who happened to see it might feel an unexplainable urge to walk closer, to step carefully across the stones, to follow. Not many did. But on one particular night, a person did. Her name was Elowen, and she lived in a small cottage a short walk from the sea. The cottage was old in the way that felt friendly, with wooden beams that had listened to many storms and windows that had watched many sunsets. Elowen's days were simple. She mended nets for fishermen. She brewed tea for neighbors who stopped by with damp coats and soft gossip. She wrote short notes on scraps of paper and tucked them into jars, as if the jars were keeping the words safe. She loved quiet things. The sound of a kettle beginning to sing, the way a candle's flame leaned when someone walked past, the faint ticking of rain against the roof. Yet even with her peaceful life, there were nights when she felt as though her thoughts were little birds fluttering in a closed room, unable to find where to rest. On those nights, she would walk to the shore and listen to the tide, letting the waves take her worries and smooth them into nothing. This night was like that. The sky was a deep velvet stitched with stars that looked freshly placed. The moon sat low and calm, a pale coin offered to the sea. Elowen walked with a shawl around her shoulders, the fabric smelling faintly of lavender from the drawer where she kept it. Her boots pressed into damp sand with a soft, satisfying sound, and the cold air kissed her cheeks until she felt pleasantly awake and gently sleepy at the same time. She paused near the cove, as she often did, to watch the tide pools shimmer. Usually she simply stood and breathed, letting her mind become as wide and open as the ocean. But tonight, the lantern was there. At first she thought it was a trick of moonlight on wet rock, or a fisherman's lamp bobbing in the distance, yet it was too steady, too patient. It hovered near the tide pools, and its glow seemed to gather the darkness into a soft circle, as though the night itself had leaned in to listen. Elowen felt no fear, only curiosity, gentle as a feather. She stepped onto the rocks, careful and slow. The stones were slick with sea spray, but they held her weight kindly. A small crab paused, lifted its tiny claws like a cautious greeting, then scuttled into the shadows. The lantern drifted forward just a little, as if inviting her to follow. She did. With each step, the sounds of the world seemed to soften. The wind became a hush. The distant waves became a steady, reassuring breath. Even the stars looked closer, like lanterns hung from invisible branches. Elowen's thoughts, which had been fluttering earlier, began to settle as though they were finding a place to perch. The lantern led her toward a wide tide pool near the center of the rocky field. This pool was different from the others. It was ringed with smooth stones that looked arranged rather than scattered. Small shells lined the edge, each one pale and luminous, as if it had stored moonlight during the day and was now letting it out in slow sighs. Elowen crouched beside the pool. The water was so clear that it almost didn't look like water at all. It looked like a window into another place. Beneath the surface, there were tiny gardens of coral and strands of sea grass that waved in slow motion. A starfish clung to a rock like a quiet ornament. A fish, no longer than Elowen's finger, moved through the pool with graceful ease, its scales flashing silver, then disappearing into darkness again. Then, without a ripple, words appeared. They did not appear as letters floating on the surface. They appeared as a feeling, as an understanding that rose gently in Elowen's mind. It was the sense of a door waiting to be opened, and the knowledge that the door was not made of wood or iron, but of water, an invitation. Elowen leaned closer, and the lantern hovered above her shoulder like a watchful friend. The tidepool's surface brightened. It began to glow from within like a deep-sea creature waking in the dark. The light spread slowly, painting Elowen's hands in pale blue. The air around the pool grew cool and sweet, tasting faintly of salt and something else. Something like the clean scent of paper after rain. Elowen felt a soft tug in her chest, not pulling her roughly, but guiding her the way music guides a listener. She took a slow breath, and then she reached out, touching the surface of the tide pool with the tip of her finger. The water welcomed her touch. It did not splash. It did not chill her. It felt like silk, smooth and warm, as though the tide pool had borrowed warmth from her skin and was offering it back. When she pressed her finger a little deeper, the water parted, opening like a curtain. Elowen's breath caught, but only in wonder. The lantern drifted forward, and Elowen followed, leaning in. The tide pool became a passage. It widened, not outward but inward, revealing depth where there shouldn't have been any. The rocks around her seemed to fade. The cove's night sounds became distant, like a song heard from another room. The moonlight softened and blurred, and the tide pool's glow became a gentle path. Elowen stepped forward, and just like that, she was no longer on the rocks. She stood on a floor that looked like pale sand, but it was firm beneath her feet, cool and smooth like stone, polished by centuries of tide. Above her, the ceiling arched high and wide, made of water held perfectly still. Through that watery ceiling, she could see the night sky, the moon and stars shimmering as though viewed through a calm lake. All around her, shelves rose in graceful curves. The shelves were carved from driftwood that had been bleached by sun and sea. They were braided with strands of seaweed that glowed softly like green gold threads. And on the shelves, instead of ordinary books, there were shells. Some shells were small, delicate spirals, like tiny sleeping ears. Some were large and heavy, ridged like old mountains. Some were flat and smooth as stones. They were arranged carefully, as if each had its own place in a quiet order. The lantern floated beside Elowen, and she turned slowly, taking it all in. She had stepped into the Tidepool library. There was no librarian behind a desk, no stern voice demanding silence. The whole place was silence, but not the kind that scolds. It was the kind that comforts, the kind that wraps around a person like a blanket. Elowen's shoulders dropped even more, her hands loosened. Her thoughts, which had been restless earlier, were now like calm boats tied to a dock. A soft sound drifted through the library, It might have been the slow creak of wood or the whisper of seaweed brushing against itself. It might have been the library breathing. Elowen walked forward, her footsteps quiet on the pale floor. The air was cool and clean, and when she inhaled, she could taste salt and something like old stories, paper, ink, and the gentle dust of time, even though no dust floated here. She reached the nearest shelf. A shell rested there, pearly and pale, shaped like a crescent moon. It shimmered faintly as though it held a small light inside. Elowen lifted it carefully with both hands. It was warm. Not warm like sunlight, but warm like a hand holding yours, like a hearth in a quiet home. The shell's surface felt smooth under her fingers, and when she brought it closer to her ear, she heard not the roar of the ocean, but something else. A voice, soft as foam. It did not speak in words that demanded attention. It spoke in images that drifted through Elowen's mind like slow clouds. She saw a small fishing boat rocking in gentle water. She smelled tar and rope and the clean bite of wind. She felt the steady patience of someone mending a net, knot by knot, with no hurry. She heard laughter, quiet, tired, kind, shared between people who understood the sea and each other. The images were soothing, like watching firelight dance. Elowen closed her eyes for a moment, letting the shell's story wash over her. When she opened her eyes again, she noticed something strange and lovely. The lantern had drifted away toward the deeper shelves, and a faint trail of light followed it, like a ribbon. Elowen understood, without needing to think too hard, that the lantern wanted her to explore. She placed the shell back in its spot, and it settled as if it had always belonged there. Then she walked after the lantern's glow. As she moved deeper into the library, the shelves changed shape. Some formed arches like doorways. Some curved into alcoves where clusters of shells rested together as if they were families. Here and there, tidepool water gathered in small basins set into the floor, reflecting the shelves above like mirrors. In those basins, tiny fish swam in slow circles, and their scales caught the light, making it flicker softly. Elowen came to a reading nook shaped by a ring of smooth stones. In the center, a cushion lay on the floor, woven from dried sea grass and lined with something soft and downy. It looked as though it had been waiting for her for a long time. She sat. The cushion cradled her weight, as if it knew exactly how she liked to rest. The cool air brushed her skin gently. The watery ceiling above shimmered, and she could see a faint outline of waves passing far above, as if the ocean was walking slowly over the library's roof. On a low shelf beside her, several shells rested in a row. Each one glowed a little differently, each one a different shade of quiet invitation. Elowen chose a shell the color of soft dusk, lavender with hints of silver. She lifted it, and again it was warm and comforting in her palms. She held it to her ear. This story unfolded like a slow dream. She was drifting through a kelp forest where long green fronds swayed like curtains in an underwater theater. Light filtered down in shafts, and tiny bubbles rose past her like thoughts becoming lighter and lighter. Somewhere in the distance, a whale sang, its voice deep and rounded, a sound that seemed to hold the whole ocean inside it. The whale's song did not make Elowen feel small. It made her feel held, as if the world was vast enough to carry everything without strain. The story moved gently from one image to the next. A sea turtle gliding through blue water. A cluster of glowing plankton sparkling like stars stirred by a soft hand. A calm current carrying a feather-light piece of driftwood on a slow journey. Elowen's breathing slowed. Her muscles softened. The shell's story did not require her to do anything. It simply offered her a place to float. When the images faded, the shell's glow dimmed, as though it had finished speaking and was now resting. Elowen set it back down and looked around again. The Tidepool library felt endless, but not overwhelming. It was like a beach that stretched on and on, always offering another smooth stone, another shell, another quiet wonder. The lantern reappeared in her peripheral vision, drifting toward an archway formed by intertwined driftwood and seaweed. The archway shimmered faintly, and beyond it, the light seemed deeper, bluer, like midnight underwater. Elowen rose from the cushion and followed. As she walked through the archway, the air changed. It felt cooler, and the scent shifted from salt and paper to something richer, like deep ocean caves. The shelves here were taller, the shells larger. Some were covered in fine patterns, like writing that had been etched by waves. Others were plain and smooth, as if their secrets were hidden deep inside. Elowen slowed her steps, not wanting to disturb the quiet. The lantern hovered before a particular shelf and bobbed gently, as though nodding. On the shelf sat a shell unlike any she had seen. It was not pearly or spiraled. It was shaped like a small bowl, dark and glossy, and inside it, a faint light flickered, like a candle behind tinted glass. Elowen lifted it carefully. It felt heavier than the others, not in a burdensome way, but in a way that suggested depth, like a stone warmed by sun and carried in a pocket. She brought it to her ear. At first, she heard nothing, just a soft hush. Then slowly, the hush became a sound, like rain falling into water, a gentle patter, a steady rhythm. Images rose. A storm at sea, but seen from a safe distance. Waves rolling, not crashing. Clouds moving slowly across the sky. A lighthouse standing firm, its beams sweeping the water with calm certainty. In the lighthouse, a room glowed warmly, and inside that room someone sat with a book, listening to the storm without fear. Elowen felt the comfort of that scene settle into her bones. The storm outside was real, but the warmth inside was real too. The story held both, gently, without drama. It was not a tale of danger. It was a tale of shelter. As the lighthouse's beams swept again and again through Elowen's mind, she felt something inside her unclench. as if she had been holding herself tight without noticing. The sound of rain became a lullaby. The glow of the lighthouse became a steady heartbeat. When the shell's story eased away, Elowen exhaled slowly. She realized she'd been holding her breath, and now she let it go, long and soft. She placed the shell back on the shelf and stood for a moment, simply breathing. The lantern drifted away, but Elowen did not hurry after it. She felt no need to chase. The library was patient. It would not disappear if she moved slowly. It seemed to reward slowness, as if time itself behaved differently here. She wandered deeper, letting her hands trail lightly along the driftwood shelves. The wood felt smooth and cool, and in some places it was carved with small designs. Waves, stars, tiny fish, spirals that seemed to turn inward forever. Elowen came upon a long table carved from a single piece of driftwood. It was wide and gently curved, like the spine of a whale. On its surface lay open shells, arranged as if someone had been studying them. Beside the shells sat a cup. Elowen leaned closer. The cup was made of smooth stone, and inside it was a liquid that shimmered faintly, the color of pale sea glass. It did not steam, but it gave off a comforting warmth. The lantern hovered above the cup as if offering it. Elowen lifted the cup carefully and took a small sip. The taste was gentle and surprising. It was like seawater without the harshness, like salt softened by sweetness. It tasted faintly of chamomile and something like moonlight. The warmth spread through her chest, calm and slow, and she felt even more grounded, as if the library had just tucked a blanket around her shoulders. She set the cup back down, and when she did, the table's surface shimmered. A new shell appeared, as if the table itself had decided to provide another story. This shell was small, striped with soft creams and browns. It looked like something you might find on any beach. Ordinary, unremarkable. Yet it glowed faintly as Elowen lifted it. She brought it to her ear. This story was quieter than the others, almost whispering. She saw a person walking along the shoreline at dawn, leaving footprints that filled slowly with water. The sky was pale, the world still waking. The person paused to pick up a shell, turning it over in their hand as if it were a treasure. They smiled, a small private smile, and tucked the shell into their pocket. Then they continued walking, unhurried, their breath visible in the cool air. The story lingered on small details, the way the wet sand shone, the way a gull stood still, watching the tide, the way the horizon held a soft line between sea and sky, as if the world was gently stitched together. Elowen felt her mind quiet even more. There was something deeply soothing about a story that paid attention to small things, as though small things were enough. When the images faded, Elowen kept the shell in her hand for a moment longer, simply feeling its warmth. She set it down gently. The lantern drifted away again toward a corridor formed by tall shelves. Elowen followed, her steps slow, her shawl trailing behind her like a soft shadow. The corridor led to a chamber where the ceiling of water above seemed closer, as if the ocean itself had leaned down to listen. Here the light was dimmer, but not dark. It was the kind of dimness that feels safe, like a room lit by a single lamp late at night. In the center of the chamber was a tide pool. Not a small basin like the ones Elowen had seen earlier, but a wide, circular pool set into the floor. Its water was perfectly still, reflecting the shelves and ceiling like a mirror. Around the pool's edge, shells were arranged in a circle, each one glowing softly, each one humming with quiet possibility. The lantern hovered over the pool and then lowered, dipping its light toward the water. Elowen stepped closer and looked down. In the pool's surface, she did not see her own reflection. She saw a library within the library, rows of shelves stretching into gentle distance, candles glowing like fireflies, tables waiting with open pages, and beyond that, a door that looked like it was made of pearl, glowing faintly. Elowen felt no urgency, only a calm pull, like gravity made of kindness. She sat by the pool, folding her legs comfortably, and placed her hands on her knees. The stone beneath her was cool, and she liked the feeling. It reminded her she was here, safe, held. The pool's surface shimmered. A story began without her even lifting a shell. The chamber itself seemed to offer it like a lullaby the walls had been saving. Elowen's mind drifted into the story as easily as a leaf floating into a slow stream. She was in a place where the sea met the sky in a gentle haze. The air was warm and humid, and the water was calm, lapping softly against a shore made of smooth glass pebbles. Each pebble held a color: blue, green, amber, rose, and when the waves rolled over them, the colors deepened, glowing like jewels underwater. Along the shore, small tide pools formed naturally, each one a pocket of quiet. In every tide pool, something glimmered, not treasure, not gold, but tiny moments. Laughter, sighs, soft conversations, the feeling of sunlight on closed eyelids, the comfort of being wrapped in a blanket after coming in from the cold. The story moved slowly along that shore. It paused often, letting Elowen rest in each scene. It did not rush toward an ending. It seemed content to simply be. Elowen felt herself relax in a way she had not realized she needed, as if her bones had been carrying weight that they could now set down, as if her thoughts had been trying to stand guard, and now they could finally sit. In the story, Elowen watched as a gentle tide came in, washing over the colorful pebbles. The water did not erase the colors. It made them shine. It smoothed their edges even more, as if the tide was whispering, "It's all right, it's all right, it's all right." The refrain settled into her breathing. It's all right. The story's tide kept coming steady and calm, and with each slow wave, Elowen felt herself drifting deeper into ease. When the story began to fade, it did so like dusk, not like a door closing. The images softened, the colors dimmed gently. The sound of water became quieter and quieter, until it was only the echo of a rhythm, like a heartbeat far away. Elowen opened her eyes. The chamber was still. The lantern hovered nearby, its light a warm circle in the cool blue dimness. The tide pool in the floor reflected the shelves and ceiling again, as if nothing had happened. Yet Elowen felt changed, lighter, calmer, as though she had been gently washed clean. She rested her hands on the stone beside her and took a slow breath. Around her, the Tidepool library seemed to breathe with her. The shelves did not creak. The water ceiling did not ripple. The silence did not demand anything. Elowen sat for a while longer, simply existing in that quiet. Eventually, the lantern drifted towards the way she had come, and Elowen understood it was time. Not time in the urgent sense, not time as a command. Time is a natural turning, like the tide shifting, like sleep arriving when it is ready. Elowen stood and followed the lantern back through the corridors of shelves. As she walked, she glanced at the shells again, feeling gratitude for their gentle stories. She did not need to take anything with her. The feeling of the library had already settled inside her, like a calm ocean held in a small, safe place. They returned to the first reading nook, the cushion still waiting, still soft. Elowen paused there and let her fingers brush the woven seagrass. She smiled faintly, not from excitement, but from quiet contentment. Then she continued on, following the lantern's glow until she reached the Tidepool passage. The Tidepool looked like a tide pool again, clear water in a ring of stones and shells. Yet when Elowen stepped toward it, the surface parted as gently as before, opening like a curtain made of silk. She stepped through. The night air of the cove met her skin, cool and familiar. The sound of distant waves returned, soft and steady. The moon hung above the water, and the stars watched quietly. Elowen stood on the rocks again, her boots secure on the slick stone. The lantern hovered for a moment longer, as if making sure she was safely back. Then it drifted upward, rising like a slow firefly, and its glow dimmed until it became a faint spark, and then nothing at all. Elowen did not feel lonely when it vanished. She felt full of quiet, as though she had been given a gentle gift. She walked back along the shore toward her cottage, moving slowly, savoring the way the sand supported each step. The wind brushed her hair softly. The world felt calm, and she felt calm inside it. When she reached her cottage, she slipped off her boots and hung her shawl by the door. The room was cool, but not cold. She lit a candle, and its flame leaned slightly, then steadied, as if it too had been waiting for peace. Elowen poured herself a small cup of warm tea. The scent rose gently, herbs and comfort, and she took a sip, feeling the warmth glide down her throat like a slow, kind river. Then she climbed into bed. The blankets were soft. The pillow held her head perfectly. Outside, the sea continued its patient breathing, waves arriving and departing with no effort. Elowen closed her eyes, and behind her eyelids, the Tidepool library still glowed faintly. Driftwood shelves, luminous shells, water held still like a ceiling of glass. She did not try to hold the images tightly. She let them drift, the way the tide drifts. She let them soften the way moonlight softens on sand. Her breathing slowed. In, out, in, out. And as she lay there safe in her bed, she knew that the Tidepool library would remain, tucked quietly into the world, waiting under the sea's gentle watch, not demanding visitors, not calling loudly, simply existing patient and calm, like a secret that only reveals itself to those who need it. Elowen's thoughts became quieter, fewer, like shells settling at the bottom of a pool. The candle's flame flickered, then steadied, then dimmed as she let sleep come closer. Outside, the tide turned, slow and certain. Inside, Elowen's body grew heavy with comfort, her mind floating on a calm sea. The images of shells and tide pools blurred into softness. The sound of waves became more distant, like a lullaby heard through a doorway, and everything, little by little, became still. Good night, dear traveler. Sleep well.